Is now officially Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. The left threatening new battles over recusal, legitimacy, and even impeachment just 28 days before the midterm elections. The Republican candidate for California governor going head-to-head with Democrat darling Gavin Newsom today in their only debate. We invited them both here. So who agreed to show up live tonight? And can a Republican actually have a chance to win in the Golden State? Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We begin tonight with correspondent Doug McKelway live at the White House where, a short time ago, Justice Brett Kavanaugh had his ceremonial swearing in. Doug.
And Shannon, tonight's ceremony was technically unnecessary. Justice Kavanaugh was actually sworn in Saturday night in the immediate aftermath of the Senate vote. But President Trump wanted to see this ceremonial swearing in as a sign of the legitimacy of the process and the legitimacy of Brett Kavanaugh. As the Kavanaugh family entered, they received a standing ovation. The crowd remained standing as the president, flanked by former Justice Kennedy and Kavanaugh, entered the room. The president took the unusual step of offering an apology to Justice Kavanaugh.
On behalf of our nation, I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering you have been forced to endure. Those who step forward to serve our country deserve a fair and dignified evaluation, not a campaign of political and personal destruction based on lies and deception.
Kennedy, for whom Kavanaugh once clerked and admired as a hero, administered the oath of office.
I, Brett M. Kavanaugh, do solemnly swear
that I will administer justice without respect to persons.
that I will administer justice without respect to persons,
And do equal right to the poor and to the rich.
and do equal right to the poor and to the rich.
In his remarks, Kavanaugh thanked all of those at the White House, in the Senate, among his family and friends who shepherded him through the confirmation process. He vowed to work as one in a team of 9 justices, all of whom, he said, revere the Constitution. And while he acknowledged the process had tested him, he said it did not change him.
My approach to life also remains the same. I will continue to heed the message of Matthew 25. I will continue to volunteer to serve the least fortunate among us. I will continue to coach, teach, and tutor. I will continue to strive to be a good friend, colleague, husband, and dad.
His words are unlikely to change the mind of Democrats. DNC Chairman Tom Perez told his supporters that Republicans must, quote, pay a price for putting Brett Kavanaugh on the high court. Shannon?
Doug McKelway live at the White House. Thank you, Doug. Stakes gambit for Democrats, carrying on the fight and even discussing impeachment of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
Will we seek truth to set the record straight? Yes, but that does not mean that we will be making a priority of impeachment.
The Democrats are shooting themselves in the foot. We ought to be moving forward. Let's judge Justice Kavanaugh on his performance as a justice of the Supreme Court.
All right, let's bring in George Washington University constitutional law professor Jonathan Turley. Professor, always good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, what do you make of this discussion? Bad advice for the Democrats or good to continue to discuss this impeachment idea?
Well, it's terrible advice. I mean, there has to be some finality in our system, and there also has to be some respect for the institution. If the Democrats want to create this monster, then they have to wonder how they're going to control it. You know, there were allegations that Elena Kagan was not entirely truthful in her testimony, but people didn't call for investigation and her impeachment. At some point, you're doing serious harm to the very foundations of our system, and that's what's happening here. If every confirmation can be redone when a majority shifts, then we're going to lose the stability that the court has had. We've been through terrible things in this country, things that would break a lot of constitutional systems into small pieces. But we've survived in part because of that stability, and not in small part because of the Supreme Court.
Well, and it seems like there's a little bit of split, even maybe within the Democratic Party, because you hear top leaders like former Speaker and hoping to be Speaker again, Nancy Pelosi, say things like, well, it's not a priority, it's not a top thing. But Congressman Nadler, who would be the top member now, the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House, if they took back the House, said this: "It's not something we're eager to do, but the Senate having failed to do its proper constitutionally mandated job of advise and consent, we are going to have to do something to provide a check and balance to protect the rule of law and to protect the legitimacy of one of our most important institutions." You touched on this. There are a lot of people now who think that if you can somehow put this asterisk or taint on now Justice Kavanaugh, it then renders what flows from the court possibly illegitimate as well.
Yeah, what I'm most disappointed in is that it wasn't that long ago when there were real institutionalists, people of integrity in Congress on both parties who would have denounced this immediately. I was shocked that leading Democrats didn't immediately say, no, this is wrong. This is the bridge we won't cross. But there seems to be a new development where we've given license for people to be enraged, to feel that they no longer have to be fair or empathetic. And people have to wonder, you know, it's a lot like the old saying about Saturn, that revolutions like Saturn devour their young. The Democrats have to be very careful. If they unleash this, they may find that it comes back to haunt them in years to come.
I want to play a little bit of what now Justice Kavanaugh said tonight, knowing that he is going to be open to this criticism about being too partisan or political. Here's what he said.
My goal is to be a great justice for all Americans and for all of America. I will work very hard to achieve that goal. I was not appointed to serve one party or one interest, but to serve one nation.
And I noticed, too, he said, I'm going to be a member of the team. I'll be a team player of 9, and all other 8 justices were there tonight.
Yeah. And look, this is a very close-knit group. They have to be. There's only 9 of them. He's going to cast one of those votes. Look, will his Wikipedia page begin with this controversy? You bet. But it won't end there. He's going to have years of cases, decades. That's called a legacy. So it doesn't really matter in the end. He knows that. He will be largely remembered by the cases that he writes, and he has decades to do it.
And possibly overturning the Chevron deference, not to get too wonky on people, but this real check on administrative agencies and their power to make their own rules.
That's significant. I got to tell you, this docket was made for Kavanaugh. It's a coincidence, but he's starting out in all of the areas where he's likely to really take the court in a different direction from Justice Kennedy. Criminal cases, environmental cases, executive power cases. It just fell that way. But he's really going to leave a legacy early.
All right. Professor Turley, thank you for stopping in.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Right out of this incredibly contentious fight, both sides are hoping to motivate their bases. Democrats think they now have an advantage with a crucial voting bloc, independent suburban women. Trace Gallagher is on the case from our West Coast newsroom. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Shannon, every branch of Ohio state government is currently controlled by Republicans, but it remains a vital swing state, and it's where California Democratic Senator and potential 2020 presidential candidate Kamala Harris came to stir up emotion and drum up Democratic support by calling the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh a sham and disgrace. Watch.
Let's speak the truth, that it was a denial of justice for the women of this country and sexual assault survivors, men and women in this country. Let's speak that truth.
Though in this case, the truth appears to fall along party lines, and the left is using the Kavanaugh vote to both rally supporters and bully opponents. Maine GOP Senator Susan Collins, a key vote in the confirmation, has reportedly gotten death threats along with vulgar messages, including someone wishing that she be raped. And Women's March leader Linda Sarsour launched a racial attack against Collins, saying because of her vote for Kavanaugh, she was guilty of espousing white supremacy, going on to tweet, quoting, Senator Susan Collins is the mother and grandmother of white women in America who gave us a Donald Trump presidency, the 53%. And some female writers also attacked white women. In the New York Times, Alexis Grinnell called female Republican senators, quote, gender traitors, to borrow a term from the dystopian TV series The Handmaid's Tale. They've made standing by the patriarchy a full-time job. An NBC op-ed written by Sophia Nelson Nelson, who calls herself a proud Republican, says, quote, Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation is the ultimate affirmation of the patriarchy, and Republican women let it happen. And in an open letter to white women, Eve Ensler, author of the Vagina Monologues, writes in Time magazine, quoting again, stop the ascension of a man who is angry, aggressive, and vengeful, and could very well be a sexual assaulter. And yet, when asked, do you approve or disapprove of the way Democrats in the U.S. Senate are handling Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, 30% of independents approved, 58% disapproved. Shannon.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about those numbers. Coming up, Trace, thank you very much. And wasting no time, Justice Kavanaugh keeping his promise by hiring 4 female law clerks.
I'm proud that all 4 of my newly hired law clerks at the Supreme Court are women, a first in the history of the Supreme Court.
All right, tonight's panel here to weigh in, former spokesman for Obama for America, Zach Friend, and the CEO and president of Concerned Women for America, Penny Young Nance. Welcome to you both. Good to see you tonight. To be here. Okay, I want to read a little bit more of the New York Times opinion piece that Trey cited, and it said, white women, come get your people. That is the headline. It said, white women benefit from patriarchy by trading on their whiteness to monopolize resources for mutual gain. In return, they're placed on a pedestal to be, quote, cherished and revered, but all the while denied basic rights. Penny, are you being denied your basic rights?
Wow, I got to tell you, I'm still rolling from what Kamala Harris said. She does not represent all women. By the way, Concerned Women for America is the nation's largest public policy women's organization. And a lot of what I've heard tonight, read from the New York Times, is racist and belittling of our experience. By the way, and Shannon, as you know this, I am a survivor of a physical assault and attempted rape on a Virginia running path when I was pregnant with my first child. I take all this very seriously. And what they have managed to do in the left is to really gin up enthusiasm like I have never seen since the last election and many years maybe before that. It has been, our phones are ringing off the hook. Women are saying, how can we get involved? We had a rally of 500 women outside the Senate, although you didn't see it covered other than probably on Fox. And we had women walking the halls in Women for Kavanaugh t-shirts because we believe in fairness. We believe in equal protection under the law. We believe as the mama bears of this country that we want to have fairness for both of our children, our sons and our daughters.
Well, Zach, let me bring you in here because obviously the left was very motivated by this too. And we saw scores of women. I was here covering the vote on Saturday. There were hundreds of people on the stairs of the Capitol and then onto the Supreme Court. I mean, clearly they were very motivated by this, and Democrats feel good that that's potentially an in for them with this very important voting block of suburban women come the midterms.
Well, I think there's been a pretty significant movement toward the Democrats for suburban women since 2016. But I'll say that actually this confirmation fight seemed to also solidify the Republican base as well. I think it makes the Senate a more difficult grab for the Democrats right now. And I think, as Mark Penn had actually said on an earlier show, right now I think you could use some more adults in the room in general. Right where I think we need to go at this point is actually having some sense of healing across the country. Some people that actually can take the partisanship out and actually try and bring democracy back to the country, because a lot of senses of people is that the government isn't working for them, the court isn't working for them, and they feel like their voice isn't being heard at all. And I think if the Democrats can tap in the sense of, in essence, being the adult in the room, then actually they'll be successful in November. I think if we continue the petty fights, both sides are actually engaged in pretty significant petty fighting right now. I don't know how this will play out.
Yeah, people have pretty bad taste in their mouth. All right, I want to play a little back and forth on how the media is being perceived in this whole thing, and then we'll get you both to comment.
Do you think the press is coming out of this looking weaker because many people feel that the press chose a side through this?
Yes, certainly that's the way it's going to look to Trump supporters and to people who've been questioning the media's bias and their ability to report straight for a long time. And we know where the public trust numbers are for the press generally, and it's somewhere down below the basement.
Zach, I think we're worse than Dennis now. On our ratings.
Well, I tell you, I mean, right now you're not rewarded for doing true journalism. I mean, people are self-selecting into their biases, both on social media and traditional media. I mean, I think a lot of people that are watching right now have a certain viewpoint, just like people that watch other networks have their own viewpoint. And I think that a lot of journalists got into this for the right reasons, but they're rewarded for breaking a story even when they don't have all the facts of the story right now. It's more expediency than fact, and I think that's problematic.
Very quick. To you, Penny.
You know, journalists are people, and unfortunately I saw so much of their own bias shine through, particularly in this case, even perhaps even here. I think it's really important for us all to step back and to let the healing begin.
Yeah. By the way, everyone is welcome here on Fox News at Night. You can come no matter what you're thinking at home. We'd love to have all of you. All right, Zach and Penny, thank you both very much.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll hear from one of the candidates in the battle to become California's next governor, Republican John Cox and Democrat Gavin Newsom today duking it out in their first and only debate.
I will certainly appoint justices in California who will respect the Constitution.
I opposed his nomination, and I think it was a sad day yesterday when he got sworn in.
And an overlooked part of Kavanaugh accuser Christine Blasey Ford's story, whether a friend of Ford's, who's also reportedly a former FBI agent, encouraged another alleged witness to change her story. What her attorney's saying. The author of Deep State, Jason Chaffetz, is here to weigh in after the break, and we'll also get his take on the latest news on Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
We had a very nice talk. We actually get along, and really good talk.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says impeaching Justice Kavanaugh is not a priority, but she is seeking, in her words, to set the record straight. She's not alone. Republicans are demanding answers as well. Correspondent Garrett Tenney is here to explain both sides. It's not over.
No, Shannon, this fight is far from over. And Democrats, what they are not happy with is this supplemental investigation the FBI did into sexual assault allegations against Justice Kavanaugh. They complain that the Bureau was not given enough time to thoroughly conduct an investigation and claim Republicans limited the scope of what allegations agents could look into. This weekend, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said in a letter to her Democratic colleagues, quote, "To preserve the full record of this dark chapter, I am filing a Freedom of Information Act request so the public can see the FBI report, transcripts of interviews, instructions from the White House, and any communications to the FBI from Senate Republicans regarding the scope of the investigation." Now, it's not clear how much information she'll be able to get through a FOIA request, though. Congress is legally exempt from FOIA requirements, and executive privilege typically protects most of the White House's communications. But if Democrats retake the House, that would give congressional investigators subpoena power, and that's something many on the left are calling for.
The focus now has to be on investigating the investigator. Why was it so circumscribed? Who straitjacketed it? Who dictated the interviews? That's the first step.
Republicans, meanwhile, are calling for investigations of their own. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is one of several Republicans calling on the Judiciary Committee to find out who leaked to the media the private letter Christine Blasey Ford wrote to Senator Dianne Feinstein laying out her allegation of assault. McConnell told Politico, quote, "I think it clearly was honestly a despicable thing to do to Dr. Ford, and it kind of underscored the tactics that have been used." At this point, Chairman Chuck Grassley hasn't decided if he will launch a full investigation into the leak, but he has asked Ford's lawyers to turn over any communications they had with Senator Feinstein's office or Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono's about the allegations against Kavanaugh. One thing's for certain, a month from now, we will know a lot more about where all of these investigations go.
Yeah, and how voters feel about it as well. All right, Garrett, thank you.
My pleasure.
Confirmation of the battle has been so heated that many missed a Wall Street Journal report about a former FBI agent, Monica McClain, a friend of Ford's, accused of trying to pressure an alleged witness into changing her initial statement. At issue, the Journal says, is a statement to the Judiciary Committee by Leland Kaiser that she didn't know Kavanaugh. Remember, the party Ford described her witness any alleged assault. Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, former Republican congressman and author of the brand new book, bestseller The Deep State, joins us live. Jason, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Shannon.
Okay, I want to make sure that I read what we hear from McClain's attorney. He said any notion or claim that Ms. McClain pressured Leland Kaiser to alter Ms. Kaiser's account of what she recalled concerning the alleged incident between Dr. Ford and Brett Kavanaugh is absolutely false. But the Wall Street Journal does continue to report that Kaiser told the FBI she was under some kind of pressure to clarify or change in some way her initial statement. What do you make of it?
Well, I think this does require Congress to look a little bit further. Chairman Grassley has a lot of latitude, personal, a letter from the committee, but he can do transcribed interviews, he can do depositions, he could do a hearing. There are a lot of tools. He can issue a subpoena, he can compel testimony, he can go out and get that information. So I think he should do this. There's a reason why Ms. Ford was asked a particular question in the hearing, and I think it was the senators, particularly the staff, laying the foundation to try to understand, was there manipulation? And this Ms. McClain, supposedly a former FBI agent, as I read it, if I recall correctly, she has some fiduciary responsibilities. She understands these things as a former FBI agent.
Yeah, and an ex-boyfriend of Professor Ford had come forward, and he made the claim that Dr. Ford had helped to prepare or talk through her friend, Monica McClain, for a polygraph test. That has been denied, but it's clear there were questions there that could have gotten to that. I want to ask you about our other hot topic today, which I know is one that's on your radar, and this is the Justice Department. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Now, he and the president have butted heads at times. At least there's been pressure, some negative comments coming from the White House's direction. But today they flew together on Air Force One, and apparently it went well. Here's what the president said.
Thank you as well to our Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein for being here. Flew down together. The press wants to know, what did you talk about? But we had a very good talk, I will say it. That became a very big story, actually, folks. We had a good talk.
And the Deputy Attorney General smiling, laughing in the audience. The White House says they talked 45 minutes on Air Force about a number of different topics. Oh, to be a fly on the wall, Jason.
That would have been an interesting conversation, but I think the more interesting one is going to happen on Thursday when Mr. Rosenstein has to go and listen to congressional investigators and answer questions from the likes of a John Ratcliffe and a Trey Gowdy and Mark Meadows. Those are going to be a little bit more pointed and a little bit more aggressive about Mr. Rosenstein. Did he offer and suggest that he would wear a wire? What was the topic of the discussion? Because supposedly, according to the New York Times, if that did happen, it was literally hours, if not just a couple of days later, that Mr. Mueller gets appointed. So what was going on in that discussion? He's got a little tougher conversation with Congress coming up later this week.
Yeah, any predictions on where we are in the Mueller investigation? It's kind of gotten crowded out with all the Kavanaugh news, but the clock has been ticking on that one as well.
There's internal guidance at the Department of Justice to try not affect an election. We're within that window where voting is actually starting. I think it'll be dead silent from, although there'll be Rosenstein news. I think there'll be other sort of deep state news, if you will, coming out this week. But I think for Mr. Mueller himself, it will be after the midterm election in November.
All right, just weeks away now. Jason, thank you very much.
Thanks, Shannon.
Are heading into every election, we all watch for the so-called October surprise. Well, is that what the newly formed Republican unity coming out of the Kavanaugh chaos amounts to? We'll see if the GOP's got what it takes to close the intensity gap.
I've never campaigned against a colleague in my life. That's about change.
Hurricane Michael getting strength as it barrels towards the Gulf Coast. A live report from the Fox News Extreme Weather Center just minutes away. Plus, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on his way back through a tour all through Asia, and he's talking about any real progress with North Korea on nukes. Stick with us. Matt is on his way back to Washington tonight. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo returning from a trip to Asia that was marked by persistent tensions with China and renewed hope of increasing cooperation with North Korea. He's here as senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott.
Secretary of State Pompeo in Beijing today, briefing his counterpart there about his meeting with North Korean Chairman Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang.
I do want to share with you my visit with Chairman Kim Jong-un yesterday, progress we made.
But there were other things on Foreign Minister Wang Yi's mind, like the escalating trade war between U.S. and China and recent U.S. arms sales to Taiwan.
We believe all these have directly struck the mutual trust of the two nations, cast a shadow over the future of the China-U.S. relations.
While acknowledging there are differences, Pompeo called the relationship between Washington and Beijing important, especially when it comes to reining in China's ally, North Korea. In a meeting Sunday with Chairman Kim, The secretary claimed there was significant progress towards the North giving up its nuclear weapons. Kim confirmed a pledge to allow inspectors to visit a nuclear site supposedly destroyed earlier this year, as well as a missile site it says it will dismantle. And they discussed a follow-up to the June Singapore summit of President Trump and Chairman Kim. Pompeo also met with South Korean President Moon in Seoul.
I want all of you to work closely with the U.S. and put in maximum efforts into making the second North Korea-U.S. summit happen as soon as possible.
It is not known if the latest demand from North Korea was discussed, that the U.S. sign on to an end of Korean War declaration, or the current demand from the U.S., a full counting of the North's weaponry, both negotiation roadblocks.
We asked for a full inventory of all of their nuclear sites and all their ballistic missiles, and we wanted a timetable to disarm. That still hasn't taken place.
South Korean President Moon also said today that Kim Jong-un is planning other summits, including one with Chinese President Xi. It would be their third. After today, it's not clear what will come out of that one. Shannon.
Greg Palcott, thank you very much. Time now for Where in the World. President Trump responding to bombshell claims that Saudi Arabia is responsible for the alleged death of a Washington Post journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, on diplomatic property. Saudi Arabia calling the allegations from Turkish officials baseless.
I don't like hearing about it, and hopefully that will sort itself out. Right now, nobody knows anything about it, but there's some pretty bad stories going around. I do not like it.
China confirming Interpol former president's being investigated for corruption after he seemingly disappeared while visiting that country. He's since resigned from the global police body. His wife says he texted her on September 26th and said, "Wait for my call," but the call never came. Instead, she says 4 minutes later he sent a picture of the knife emoji. And a grim outlook following the earthquake and tsunami in Indonesia, where some 5,000 people are believed to be trapped in mud, which is too soft for heavy machinery. Nearly 2,000 are already confirmed dead. Officials say their search may end later this week. Hurricane Michael gaining strength tonight is expected to make landfall along Florida's Gulf Coast on Wednesday. Let's go to meteorologist Adam Klotz in the Fox News Extreme Weather Center for details. Adam?
Well, Shannon, already a growing storm at this point, getting up to this point, Category 1, but we're actually up to 90 miles an hour. This is the most latest update that came in at 11 p.m. That puts it just 6 miles an hour below. With your wind speed, a Category 2 storm running over warm Gulf water. It is going to continue to intensify, and actually we're going to be jumping up to the Category 2 level eventually, probably overnight tonight. Advisory is already stretching from portions of Panama City over towards the bend there in Florida. So a large area where hurricane force conditions eventually are going to be moving in. Now, what's the time for this? Again, currently a Category 1 storm jumping up to a Cat 2, eventually a Category 3 storm, which puts winds at 115 to 120 miles an hour. That likely heading overnight tomorrow, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, before making landfall early Wednesday morning. The timing on this still going to work out within a couple of hours, but this is looking like a Wednesday morning landfall there right along the Gulf Coast. We've got several models here, and there's still a little bit of room for wiggle in this, but the farthest we're looking for models to stretch to the west, maybe Pensacola. A lot of these models running it right into Panama City Beach, Florida. So those are going to be the areas we're paying attention to. But that's just where the eye wall would fall. There's a wider area here that would be doing some damage, and that's the wind field. You can pay attention to the timestamp here up in the corner. Everything in this larger circle, those are talking about tropical storm force winds. Those happening through the overnight hours tomorrow night. Again, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. And then those real strong winds, those will be arriving on Wednesday morning, really through the day. And that's what we're talking about for when this hits. Shannon, this is not going to be a Florence. It's not going to be all rain. This is going to be a quick hitter with wind, with storm surge, and then, yes, some of that rain also.
All right. Adam Klotz, thank you very much for the update. California holding its one debate between gubernatorial candidates. The media fair and balanced. GOP nominee John Cox has something to say about that. Plus, it is not music to the president's ears. Taylor sides with Democrats in the wake of the battle, Kavanaugh.
I'm sure Taylor Swift has nothing or doesn't know anything about her. And let's say that I like Taylor's music about 25% less now.
All right, well, John Fund is here live next. He's digging into midterm polling with some interesting notes for those predicting a blue tsunami. Voters will head to the polls, and there's plenty of speculation about which party will benefit from the battle over confirming Justice Kavanaugh. Correspondent Peter Ducey reports.
Angry anti-Kavanaugh activists have all but left Washington. So now Democratic lawmakers are hitting the road, trying to keep the excitement on the left alive.
Let's go! 31 days left! How long?
For voters hurt by the confirmation, Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren says, take your pain and turn it into power on November 6th. Democrats are already seeing new voices leave the sidelines, like Susan Rice, the former Obama National Security Advisor, who feels so betrayed by Senator Susan Collins voting yes on Kavanaugh, she might run against her in 2020. And the previously apolitical Taylor Swift picking a side, telling her 112 million Instagram followers to vote for the Tennessee Democrat Phil Bredesen, posting, quote, as much as I have in the past and would like to continue voting for women in office, I cannot support Marsha Blackburn. Her voting record in Congress appalls and terrifies me. But for Republicans, the Kavanaugh confirmation chaos has been a cash cow. The National Republican Congressional Committee, which is fighting to keep control of the House, says 418% more money flowed into its accounts compared to the same week last month.
Republicans have had a little lack of enthusiasm, and in fact, we had 9 special elections. We spent a lot of time and money trying to turn out reluctant Republicans, and now Republicans are excited.
So excited that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell refers to recent Democratic tactics as a political gift.
What I think this has done for us is provide the kind of adrenaline shot that we had not been able to figure out how to achieve in any other way.
The upper chamber is all about tradition and precedent, but some Republicans are so livid about how Democrats approached Kavanaugh, they're about to change the way they do things in election years.
I've never campaigned against a colleague in my life. That's about to change.
It won't be an October surprise. Voters are still motivated by the Supreme Court in a month. But before the confirmation conflict, voters were most concerned about things like health care and the economy and immigration, and a month is a long time for things like that to make it back to the front page. Shannon?
Sure is. Peter Ducey, thank you very much. Well, Democrats setting their sights on suburban women to carry them through the midterms and possibly take back House, but some say not so fast. Town Hall's Matt Vespa writes, pollsters say Democrats might fall short in retaking the House, which could trigger another meltdown. National Review columnist John Funn has been digging into a lot of these poll numbers, found some interesting things. He joins us now live. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, so you heard Mitch McConnell there say that the Democrats have done what he and the Republicans were having a tough time doing, which is to galvanize and unify and fire up the Republican base. Does that something like that last for a month now? Because, you know, we have very short memories in politics.
True, but if you have liberal grassroots groups calling for the impeachment, not just of President Trump, but of Brett Kavanaugh, that's one way to keep the issue alive in the minds of voters. One thing we know about voters, they may take the economy, which is good, for granted. But if they see Democrats talking about issues that do not directly help or benefit them, like impeachment, and Republican ads now saying, well, the Democratic Congress that might take over could raise taxes, derail this economy, raise spending, increase regulation, then voters might have this in their minds when they go to the polls. And by the way, we now have election month, Shannon.
Yeah.
Over half the voters are going to be voting before Election Day.
Mm-hmm. You're so right, because there is so much early voting that now happens in 2018. So a big factor, yeah, people are already out there getting in and casting their ballots. Something interesting, the Washington Examiner writing out some of the new numbers in this new CNN poll say independent voters overwhelmingly disapproved of the Democrats' handling of nomination of Brett Kavanaugh by a 28-point margin. They were not impressed with Democrats.
Well, one of the reasons President Trump has had trouble with women voters is they don't see him always as being mature. They don't see him as acting presidential. But then this last week, they had a chance to look at the other side of the coin and saw Democrats running roughshod over due process and fairness. And so, no, a lot of Republican suburban women may not be happy with President Trump, but compared to what? Compared to the alternative, which is the mob?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in the CBS poll, they talked about the fact a lot of these key Senate races, it's not even really about state issues anymore for a lot of the people who say that they plan to go vote. They say this, by more than 2-to-1, registered voters say national issues outweigh local ones. Across the states, large majorities of each candidate's voters, whether they're going for Republicans or Democrats, say their vote is explicitly to put either either Democrats or Republicans nationally in control of the Senate. Is that something new, or is that kind of what these Senate races have morphed into?
It varies from election to election whether or not one party can nationalize the issues. But since this is such an all-consuming issue a month before the election, this election now has been nationalized. And I will tell you from previous midterm elections, when elections are nationalized, it usually benefits Republicans because those are the kind of simple, clear issues that get their voters out.
Okay, most of the polls out there say there's not good news for Republicans in the House. There's good news for Democrats. I want to refer to something in Washington Post, this new set of polling that they've done. They went through 69 battleground House districts they say are critical. They say now there's a 4-point advantage for Democrats. In those same districts back in 2016, there was a 15% advantage for Republicans. So do you think the House is lost for the GOP?
I think the Democrats are favored, but the Republicans can bounce back. You know, one thing we learned from 2016, Shannon, both in Brexit in Britain and with the Trump election, polls make mistakes, and because this electorate is changing very quickly. The Washington Post poll is a snapshot of where those 69 races are right now, but it's a snapshot with a very blurry focus. I looked at the internals of how they did that poll. They interviewed about a few hundred people. The average number of people for each of those 69 districts they interviewed was 39 respondents. Now, that's not political science. That's that's throwing darts at the wall. And I have to tell you, the margin of error is blown away at 39 people being interviewed in a district. You can't possibly tell who's ahead.
Yeah, so we'll take the grain of salt. John Fund, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, California gubernatorial candidates go head-to-head on everything from immigration to criminal justice reform and the cost of living in the Golden State. Republican John Cox is here live. He says in their only debate today, his Democrat opponent, Gavin Newsom, got nothing but softballs. We'll talk about it next.
Opportunity, Donald Trump and Trumpism. The fact is, sanctuary counties are not more violent, more dangerous than non-sanctuary cities and counties. Quite the contrary. The wall is a monument to stupidity. The wall is intended to divide this country.
All right, California's first and only gubernatorial debate took place today. Republican John Cox going head-to-head with Democratic darling Gavin Newsom on a whole host of topics. Did he get a fair shake from the media? Well, let's ask him. Republican candidate for California governor John Cox is here live. And by the way, we'll note we have invited Gavin Newsom numerous times, his Democratic opponent. We've not heard back. All right, so John, good to have you with us. How'd you feel the debate went today?
Great to be with you, Shannon. Well, you know, it was called a conversation, and I called it the non-conversation conversation. We got asked a bunch of questions. We obviously talked about affordability and the cost of living, the cost of housing, the cost of gasoline and the gas tax. But we then had a whole huge discussion about gay marriage and guns, neither of which I'm running on, neither of which is much in controversy. We didn't talk about water, which is a huge issue in California.
It is.
Mr. Newsom is in favor of rationing. The legislature just enacted rationing. Our farmers out here, you know, we are the salad bowl of the country. Our farmers are being starved of water. We didn't talk about education. Education is a keen issue out here because we've gone from being one of the top states in the nation in education to where we're now 47th in proficiency. And Mr. Newsom is a wholly owned subsidiary of the teachers' unions out here, and we didn't get a chance to talk about that.
Well, let me tell you what the San Francisco Chronicle said and then get your response. They said time and again, Cox found himself on the defensive when Newsom challenged the GOP candidate about past statements. Cox exhibited a particular bit of frustration when Newsom brought up the Republican positions on concealed weapons and other gun control issues. Their headline was Gavin Newsom's the clear winner.
Well, there's others that say that I was the clear winner because I talked about the affordability. Listen, Shannon, the real important thing here is what do the voters care about? And we got voters all across California who can't afford rent, who can't afford to pay for gasoline, they can't afford food. Electricity rates are twice what Texas pays. Our schools are an absolute disgrace to failing. Our roads are congested. Meanwhile, we've got Gavin Newsom in favor of a train that is way over budget, way behind schedule, and is soaking up billions of dollars that could be spent building roads and outfitting our firefighters. We've got a real disgrace of management in Sacramento, and Mr. Newsom will only double down on taxes and a rotten business economy. He'll make this state even worse than it is.
We've done a lot of stories on the troubles facing California, from poverty to homelessness to all kinds of things, along with what you mentioned.
Yes.
And California voters consistently continue to vote and primarily send Democrats to Sacramento and to oversee things in the state capitol.
That's going to change.
How do you expect to change that? You've got an uphill battle.
That's going to change. And, you mentioned homelessness. I was in San Francisco today, and, Gavin Newsom was the mayor of San Francisco, and it is really a sad situation there, Shannon. This is one of the great cities of the world. Now it's the nationwide leader in property crimes. You can't even ride the BART, and the streets are full of human waste and hypodermic needles, and really people that are just living on the streets, strung out on drugs. And Mr. Newsom's answer is to give people clean needles and an injection center so they can shoot up easier. I think we need to treat these illnesses. We need to treat mental illness as well as the abuse of drugs and alcohol, and that's the compassionate thing to do. I think people are going to reject Gavin Newsom's so-called solutions to the homelessness problem. They want a change in California. They want a state that they can be proud of, and I think they will have that state when I'm the governor of the state.
Well, you've already defied expectations by ending up in this final two in the so-called sort of jungle primary that you have.